you should be giving everything you need a reader to know in that single issue in order to understand the story of that issue. And I also think that the individual issue also needs to be a satisfying narrative, like full narrative experience unto itself, even if it's a part.
Regardless of being part 3 of a 6-part story.
In the Midwest, you know the best is there waiting, so come and join the conversation. I still approved, fan and artist and creator too. This is how the challengers do. What? Keep the conversation moving along. Keep reading comics, keep your local store strong. If it's hard, then it's a job for the challengers. What? Comics and conversation, y'all.
From Challengers Comics and Conversation in Chicago, this is Contest of Challengers, a comics industry business podcast with
Kyle Higgins, Patrick Brower, and Andrew Goldberg. Okay, this is a very exciting episode of Contest of Challengers. Very exciting for me personally because Dal's not here. But more than that, we have comic book superstar, all-around amazing human being, filmmaker, writer, so many more things that I don't even have the time to list everything he does. Kyle Higgins is with us. Kyle, thank you for joining Contest of Challengers.
Oh, thank you very much. I don't know about superstar. You could have subbed in diehard to a fault masochist Chicago Bears fan. I would have accepted that as well. And that probably,
Kyle, next year's our year.
It better be. It better be, Patrick.
We've got a winning, hopefully winning head coach now that we have the Lions offensive coordinator as our head coach. That'll be a good thing. They went pretty far this season, farther than we did.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Bears are like legitimately like the only thing I care about anymore. So that's just like all I read and listen to and watch is like anything related to the Bears. But by this point, it's like, I mean, I've done this. I'm going to be 40 this year. I was born the last time they won a Super Bowl. Like,
wow.
I know what I'm in for. And it's just, and I keep coming back and I keep thinking, yeah, maybe. Yeah, this year, this looks good. This season in particular was really, really brutal. But next year.
Yeah, because we had such high hopes.
I know. But I will say on Monday, January 20th, there was obviously a lot going on in the world. And I opened up the news and I shrieked. And my girlfriend came in and said, "What did Trump do?" And I said, "No, we got Ben Johnson."
We got Ben Johnson.
I can't believe it. We got Ben Johnson. So to me, that day will always be positive, and that's how I choose to remember and look at the world.
You know what? There was, and obviously it wouldn't have happened this year, but there was such a perverse hope in me last time that we would get. Yes, exactly. I was going to say the guy from the Chargers. Yeah, Harbaugh. Yeah, right. Oh my God, that would be great. Also with us is Challenger's own Andrew Goldberg Esquire, who is joining us this episode because he is our huge Power Rangers fan, our even bigger Massiveverse fan. So I couldn't have this opportunity pass by without Andrew being here to, hopefully A, gush, and B, fill in the gaps that I may miss as far as drilling down into really the important questions as we go along. So, Andrew, thank you for being here.
Oh, of course. The people have been demanding it for quite some time. So
that's true. You've only had like a couple of minute guest appearance in your 4.5 years as a challenger.
I feel honored that we can get maybe at least 5 through 9 knocked out today for you.
Yeah, right. We'll see what we can do. The joke of this is that I actually had told him to join us in progress, Kyle, so you and I would have some time to catch up and to lead up into where Andrew would be most relevant. Only Zencastr wouldn't let it record without everybody on the call at the same time. So Andrew,
nice to know I'm wanted.
Did he tell you you have to just be quiet for the first 15 to 18 minutes? That feels like a very Patrick move.
Patrick tells me to be quiet all day.
I mean, that's true. I sent him an email saying, "Hey, join us around 2:10." Then had to come back. No, I mean, join right now. Right now, buddy. Right now. Anyway, it's 2:10 now, so it's fine. Andrew, you're done. It's fine. You're good now. So, Kyle, I know you're doing you're doing the rounds right now, and you're talking to a lot of places, and I apologize in advance if a lot of my questions are things that you have already answered 1,000 times, but hopefully they're all reaching new ears on this platform, and it's not just the same old for you.
No. I don't mind at all. I'm happy to do it. And yeah, in particular, any platforms, especially in this day and age, that can reach readers directly as well as retailers is something that, I think is incredibly important and something I love to do. And it's so challenging these days to kind of get the word out on things. And you guys are stretched so razor thin across so many different distributors and publishers and
more of that all the time.
And so it's just like, yeah. So anyway, so I really appreciate you having me on to talk about all this stuff. And in particular now, as we're trying to like come back with like a new jumping on points for the line, and in particular Radiant Black and Rogue Sun. And it's just like, okay, like I told him, it's just like, I want to get out there. I want to really kind of talk to some places and let everyone know, like, we're back, we're on time, like we're not going anywhere. So
excellent.
Yeah, thrilled to do it.
When I had heard you were going to be an off panel, I asked David if I could just have all of his questions, and then that we'd ask you the exact same things and see if A, to see if your answers would differ, or B, to see if you'd be like, wait a minute, this is exactly like in the same order. Honestly, I would have probably clocked it, but thought I was going crazy, which right now would just be par for the course. There's a lot going on and a lot of stress. So it's like, it's kind of like, it's basically, I mean, you know this, Andrew, you know this feeling, right? Like you just wake up in the morning and you go, who am I going to disappoint today? That's kind of how right? I mean, Patrick, we got it from you. So it's something that's my eternal disapproval is always on available for everyone to pick up on.
No, I did. But yeah, I did do David's off panel, which I think I think it just went up today for patrons.
Yes. And it'll be up on Monday for everybody.
Yeah. It was awesome.
It's a longer one too.
Yeah. We went for
like an hour and a half. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's so funny is it's the first time I've ever actually done his podcast. I mean, we've talked many times.
Yeah. I know that like he's done stuff about the Massiverse before, but that's the weird thing about David is not weird, but he's got so many, like he's got his long form interviews, his short articles, and then his podcasts. And you can never tell, where, like, I never remember, like, was that a podcast? Was that an interview?
Yeah.
We talk all the time, but I do want to let you know that David said that, yes, I could have his questions, but he never gave them to me. But also he figured that you would figure it out in a heartbeat.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I could, I don't know. I prefer the one-on-one, Patrick. We go back a while at this point.
We do. Yeah. I can't even tell you when we first met.
Well, I'm hurt.
But
I'm hurt by that. I literally signed your wall.
Oh yeah, no, you signed the wall in 2011, and you did a Nightwing mask. Yeah,
I think that
I could tell you exactly where on the wall it is. If you're looking at the wall, it's on the right third. It's about head height. I know. I can picture it in my head.
Yeah, that was the first time. Well, that's the first time I signed at the store.
Yeah,
I don't know how we connected for that,
but it's kind of the thing that we'd encountered each other before. I mean, you're in LA right now, but your ties are to Joliet, Chicago, other suburbs of Chicago, right? I want to say
Lockport. Okay. Lockport, Homer Glen.
Homer Glen was the one I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah. So I grew up in Homer Glen, and I went to high school at Lockport, and then went to the University of Iowa for 2 years, and then transferred out to Chapman University in Orange County out here in Southern California. And I've been actually this summer, I will have been out here for 20 years, which is crazy to think about.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But I get back to Chicago quite a bit. So at least once or twice a year. And definitely like I do C2E2 every year. It's my favorite show. And
nice. It's your hometown show as far as I'm concerned.
I've blown up your store. So
you have blown up Challengers.
I don't do that. I don't do that for just anyone.
You do it you blew us up with love, Kyle, and we greatly appreciate that. we were able to rebuild, so we're happy about that. But
I can't wait to see the new spot.
weirdly, we have the relationship where when I walk up to you at a show, I just walk behind your table.
Yeah.
I say, like, if there's a line, I just walk behind, and I don't interrupt you talking to people, but you also don't kick me out right away, which I appreciate.
Yeah. Well, and
you eventually kick me out. But
you say weirdly, it's weird for all of us. It's not weird for you, but it's definitely very strange for the rest of us. No,
I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Well, I gotta come back, and it's been a minute since I've been in, and done any sort of signing or whatnot. So we should definitely figure that out.
We will definitely work on that.
We'll be back in April for C2E2 this year, and I think we're going to be there either a little before or a little after. So we should figure something out. I think we're going to have a Massiverse meetup this year as well. I don't think we've announced that yet, but
okay.
I'm telling you first. So.
That's an exclusive. Andrew, write that down.
It's already written down.
Nice. It's a tight weekend of stuff because New Japan Pro Wrestling is holding a show, a Windy City Riot, at the Wintrust, which connects to McCormick Place on Friday night. So we already have a box there, and I'll bring in, a bunch of challengers and out of towners who are wrestling fans to go to that. And then,
are you a WWF, WWE?
I'm an AEW guy.
AEW, okay.
Yeah. Okay. A quick history. A lot of people don't know this, but I wrestled in high school, was captain of our wrestling team. After college, when I moved in with my brother in a townhouse, he was a WWF fan, and I hated it because I thought it made a mockery of the real wrestling that I did.
You're right.
Until I started to watch it and thought, man, this is really athletic and really acrobatic. And so I watched for years, but then I got disillusioned with a lot of the politics and the people behind the scenes. And
sure,
AEW, All Elite Wrestling, started up in 2019, and it had all the people I never get to see and a bunch of my, actual human being friends in it, and I never looked back. So
cool.
I am an AEW guy, and Challengers is an AEW store.
Got it. Well, the reason I was asking is I'm not a wrestling guy for whatever reason.
Okay, well, we gotta go now. Kyle, thanks for your time.
Well, hold on, no, I'll win you back. Speaking of a Chicago connection, so my cousin Pat, his real name's Kevin Egan, but he went by Kevin Patrick, and he was recently, he calls a ton of Major League Soccer games, and now he does. I think he's like in studio analyst for Apple and their big soccer show, but he was the behind the scenes interview person.
I know him. I know of him. Yes.
And then he took over as what is it, like essentially like courts, like ringside, like play by play
announcer. Yeah. So they've got color commentator. They got play by play. Play by play is like the analyst, and color is the just anecdotes and did you see that maneuver, that kind of stuff. But yeah, so play by play is the more intellectual one.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, so he did that for a couple years, but he's from Ireland, but
I was going to say, isn't he British? Yeah.
Irish. Yeah. You should definitely mix those up when you're over there.
Oh, I did. Oh, I did. I was just in Dublin, and I kept saying pounds instead of euros, and I was angrily corrected every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how many times was it John Hendrick?
It was every time. It was John Hendrick. Every single time it was John.
John, I love your store. The Big Bang is one of the great staples of the comic book.
But yeah, I was there for a wedding, but I bookended Dublin, so I was out with John and Bruno on the first half of the trip and the back half of the trip. Bruno took the day off and just showed me all around his Dublin, which is great. But cool. Bruno just announced that he's leaving. This week is his last week at Big Bang. Yeah, he's moving across the country.
Holy cow!
And
is he going to stay in comics, or is he
no? He's leaving comics, which is a huge blow to comics because Bruno's one of the best.
He is.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's a bummer. I'll have to drop him a note.
For sure.
I was literally just going to ask. I was literally just going to say, like, I'm so happy. I'm also so glad that Bruno is still there. Like, it's been all these years.
Yeah. But they've been business partners for 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and he's packing up. He's moving to County Sligo, which is literally the west coast of Ireland, to their east coast.
that's where I have a ton of family in County Mayo.
Oh, okay.
So, Kevin and his family are in Dublin, but Kevin's grandmother is my great aunt. She passed away a few years ago, and they lived in Wrigleyville. And so Kevin and his family were over all the time growing up and spending summers in Chicago. And then Kevin lived in Chicago for many years, and his brother, I think his brother still lives there, and he might be leaving soon. But anyway, yeah. So I keep meeting people. I don't know anything about the wrestling world other than the Vince McMahon thing I watched on Netflix on my flight back from Australia a few months ago. But I'll meet people that really into it, or then they realize, or they see on like social media, Kevin and I interacted. Like, how do you know Kevin Patrick? I was like, well, we're from this, like, we literally grew up in the same family.
Yeah, we're related.
We're related. There we go. That would have been more succinct. Have you tried writing, Patrick? That was a really
no. I'm bad at it.
Give him ideas.
Shut up, Andrew. I'm gonna write better than you next Saturday, Andrew.
All right. It's a deal. It's a contest.
Okay.
I think Patrick, what we really need is more books. So.
Oh yeah, for real. Ready for the Andrew verse? It's coming.
Yeah.
A crime-fighting lawyer. Andrew, I need you to design a costume.
No one would believe that.
But
hear me out. What if you can see? Oh, that's a new twist for a crime-fighting lawyer, right?
It can see and not green.
Okay. That's fair.
That's the space we need to be in to make something unique.
Gotcha. All right, Kyle. So let's go back in time. And how did you first get into comics as a fan?
Well, it was really through a lot of the cartoons, honestly, and the few movies we had back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Sure.
So I was born in 85, so I was a huge Ninja Turtles fan. And then the first movie, when I went to see that, because I only knew the cartoon, when I went to see the movie, I was like, whoa, this is so different. I was like 5 years old. I loved it. And then that is how I learned. I don't remember who told me. It was like, oh, well, it comes from comic books, and this is more like the original books. And so from that through like things like X-Men the Animated Series, and when I was eventually allowed to watch the Tim Burton Batman movie, and certainly Richard Donner's Superman, and then of course, Batman the Animated Series and Spider-Man the Animated Series and all of those really kind of like introduced me to the genre, and I fell in love with it like so quickly. And then it was a very short trip to like, okay, well, where is more of this, And other than like Bill Bixby Incredible Hulk reruns and Nicholas Hammond Spider-Man reruns that were on in Super Friends and things like that on Sci-Fi Channel and Cartoon Network late at night, it was comic books. And so it was a short walk to like finding books at the grocery store and then later on in comic stores proper. But this was also the era where part one of a story was an Amazing Spider-Man, and part two was in like Web
Spectacular,
Part three was in like New Mutants or New Warriors. Part four was maybe in New Mutants. I don't know. So you never could find at the grocery store. You were never reading things like that made sense
in the right order. Yeah.
Yeah, done in ones, or not done in ones, but like you were reading one part of a story, but then you'd pore over it over and over again, trying to parse like, who is this character and what are the connections there, and imagining what had happened before and what would come next. And
this literally just came up the other day that back then, whatever book we got into, it was never part one of a story. You were always thrown in the middle of a thing, and you devoured it, and you kept going, and you tried to find the others. But nowadays it seems that people only want the first issue or the start of a story. Or if it's like, oh, well, this is part two, you don't know part one, I'm just not going to get it. But I mean, you as a writer specifically, but other like creators as well, give people enough to pick up a story and keep going. The old adage of any comic can be somebody's first comic. I don't think they say that as much anymore. But I mean, like part of the joy of just like diving in.
Yeah, I mean that's something that, I mean, I say that a lot, and that's something that, I mean, Bob Harris said that to me when I started at DC, and I don't know if it came from Stan Lee, but that's who he said it came from, and I very much believe that adage. And like there are things where, especially early in my career, like there were points that were frustrating because it's like I really kind of pride myself on dialogue and naturalistic dialogue. And I come from this screenwriting background and film directing background. And it's really unnatural every time, you know, a character, when Robin is calling Batman, like, well, what do you think, Batman? It's like, he wouldn't do, would he say that?
Right.
Would he do that?
No, yeah,
and
exactly.
Editors would insist, you know, and I get it. Like, you need to work the character's name in so that new readers can figure out that this guy that looks like Batman is Batman. So like, I think there are more elegant ways to do things like that. And that's what I really kind of strive for. But at the same time, the spirit of it all, I very much believe in, which is like, you should be giving everything you need a reader to know in that single issue in order to understand the story of that issue. And I also think that the individual issue also needs to be a satisfying narrative, like full narrative experience unto itself, even if it's a part.
Regardless of being part 3 of a 6-part story.
Yeah, exactly. And I know, you know, people talk about how we started writers started writing for the trade however long ago. And there's some truth to that. But I also think that, like, I don't know, all the writers I know are pretty obsessive about that as well, and trying to make sure that narratively, you know, the book, what's contained in the book is not just like something that feels like an in-between. And
yeah.
So but it is weird as well. Like, as you say, like from, I don't know if it's just like reading preferences or market trends, but like people not wanting to jump onto things with higher numbers is a little bit of a thing. And it's frustrating as a creator because, I mean, honestly, that's kind of why we're doing so much right now. And I was excited to talk to you guys today about like Radiant Black and coming back with issue 31, right? Like, because of the cattle story, we've actually done like 36 issues because we were doing, you know,
that's all the 0.5 issues. Yeah.
But from pure numbering, it's 31. So even that alone, like, how many books are up to the 30s numbering wise right now?
It doesn't happen. It's always starting over.
And how many of them are indie books?
Most, you know what? Some, like, if you look at your sagas or your Savage Dragons, which obviously Savage Dragon is a thing unto its own, or your Spawns, a lot of those. But it seems to me that the longest numbered series right now would just be Batman. Mm-hmm. It would have been Amazing Spider-Man, but it's starting over in 2 months with the same writer too, and basically the same creative team, but they're just renumbering it because that's what they do.
Oh, is it Zeb who's doing it?
No, currently it is Joe Casey. Zeb's run wrapped up, and
right.
Joe Casey came on for a story arc, but now he's sticking with it.
Okay.
And the artists are John Romita Jr. and Pepe Larraz.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how we kind of got into this. I mean, I have theories, but into this space that we exist in now. But like, yeah, I mean, I think it's more important than ever, especially on something like Radiant Black and in our stuff. It's like we have to be creating jumping on points and really be talking about like, this is a jumping on point, as well as like everything that's happened before is really accessible to find right now. Like, you can go get it in trades, like everything's out, because getting readers to try a book at, 31, much less retailers to, invest in a book at a 31 is pretty tough. I know a lot of stores that, I shouldn't say a lot, but I know some stores that it's like, something like Radiant Black, it's like, it's not even a book for the shelf. Like, they only order it for their pull box subscribers. And it's like, well, how does anyone find it then? They're like, well, It kind of sells what it sells at this point. It's like, okay, I get that, but that's also, I take that always as a challenge. Yeah. So it's like, okay, well then how do we change that? Because I do think one of the problems in the market and the industry right now is that there are so many books that are short. and it's like everything seems to be 6 issues and done, or 12 issues and done.
Yeah,
And
now Dark Horse only goes 3 to 4. They don't even do
really?
6-issue series as much. Yeah. A couple of years ago, Todd Allen, who used to be like the sales analyst for the Beat, gave me the statistic that half of the comic shops in the United States only carry Marvel, DC, and a handful of Image books. And they just ignore everything else. And like, that's a thing that it seems unfounded to me. And I've long ago realized that I can't be the barometer of what works for challengers. I'm not my clientele. But for me, the idea of a book that's in the 30s, that to me gives it a little prestige and things, they've gone this far. They have something. People care about this book and it's still around. Like, to me, it's the opposite of, it's too deep in. I don't want to get involved in something that's been going on that long.
Well, I think there's a tipping point for sure. And I don't know where that point is, but I do think you look at something like Spawn, and Spawn is over it's almost up to issue 400 at this point, or it's 3 something.
It's
and
at
a certain point, at a certain point, it's like, okay, well, this has been around for so long, and clearly, like, I don't know the Spawn's numbers have ever been better than they've been in the last couple years. I mean, maybe
there actually was a point in Challenger's life where we didn't carry Spawn for the shelf.
Oh, wow.
Because it just stopped selling, but now it's got a resurgence. And it's not doing as well as it was for us a couple years ago, but that's because they went a little too heavy and have so many series now. Gunslinger Spawn, Deadly Tales of Gunslinger Spawn, Rat City. Andrew, jump in. Help me out. What am I missing?
I think that's mostly it, but I did just want to say, I think readership does kind of crave, to a degree, these longer form series. I think a lot of people are sick of everything restarting every 4 to 6 issues.
I know I am.
You look at like Radiant Black with 30 plus issues, you've had so much runway to really develop the characters and develop the world. And I feel like that's seen less and less these days. So I do think people really crave that experience of like, I'm along for this ride. Let's see where this is going to go.
Totally.
And at the same time, it feels like you're just getting started, especially with how the Catalyst War ended, and especially what you've set up for the future. But I'm sorry, I cut you off. Go on.
Well, no, I was gonna give you a compliment, but that's fine. If you want to brush past that, we can keep going. That's okay.
That's fine. I know what I mean to you, Kyle. We're good.
I was just gonna say, I hope so. No, I was just gonna say that what you said a minute ago about not being like a barometer for what works with challengers and challengers customers. At the same time, though, I feel like you know what your customers like. I feel like you have a good sense of who your customers are. And I think curation is a thing that is incredibly important. I mean, the number of books that I found growing up because my comic store would recommend things to me and pull things for me and say like, hey, first issue is this thing. Like, I put it in your box. Like, if you don't like it, it's okay. But like, I think you will, check it out. And I would say 9.5 times out of 10, they were right.
Are they still around?
Yeah, it's Amazing Fantasy Books and Comics.
Oh, nice. Sure.
So it's Joe. I'm sure you know Joe Gentile out in Lockport, and his sister Lori out in Frankfurt, who runs a brilliant Amazing Fantasy. It's cool because I don't know how their business structure works, but like each store is its own thing. And run a little differently, but obviously they're kind of same umbrella of the central, I guess Joe's store is, I don't know if it's the main, well, it doesn't matter, but I love that the different flavors of how they run a store and what their different types of customers are. And
I want to say they were on the manga bandwagon before most people were.
Oh, I'm sure. And that'd be Lori. I mean, Lori's very, very, she has her finger on the pulse of a lot of just what's working, not only in comics, but outside of comics. And I think in particular, like, she's a really, really good example, her and Mike and some of the people at that store, of understanding who their customers are and what they like. And I have nothing but great things to say about them. And I honestly wouldn't be, to circle it all back around how I first became a fan of comics. Like, really, is them, like, because that was my first. I'd gone into comic stores here and there, but that was the first time that I think I actually set up a pull box, and it was like freshman year. Yeah, my freshman year of high school, because I could walk to the store from high school after school, and that became like, I mean, I was reading things monthly already by that point, but that became like my kind of my religion, and just kind of going every Wednesday, or a lot of times multiple times a week, I'd walk down there. So.
That's what I love to hear. And not only that's how they really spurred you into the reader you became, but that they're still doing it,
Yeah.
That they're still around.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I mean, that's I don't come from family members who are writers and creators in the professional sense. My aunt was a very amazing artist. She was an art director for, what was the name of it? Frankel. They were an advertising agency. They did a lot of like McDonald's work. Like my aunt actually she art directed the Batman Returns campaign for McDonald's, and they won some awards for it and everything. And
I had one of those mugs for a long time.
Same. And she's an amazing painter. I mean, she's got out of it years ago, and now she teaches, distance education and courses at DePaul, and she worked for a consultant company for a while as well. And my sister's an incredible artist, and my dad's a photographer, but like not in the sense of like there would be I didn't grow up around people where I ever thought like, hey, entertainment, like doing this for a living would really be possible, much less making comics. And it was Joe and Amazing Fantasy that really kind of like first introduced me to that possibility, because Joe also runs Moonstone.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
he's a publisher as well.
Yep. Being around that, and they had the rights to the Phantom and Kolchak and a bunch of different properties, and then original stuff. Like they were the original publishers of the Silencers, that Steve Ellis and Fred Van Lente book. Wizard did I remember the day Wizard came out, they did a big write-up on the Silencers, and it was a huge deal in the early 2000s. And so that was like, just seeing that and seeing him take meetings with artists and go over pages and stuff like that, just while I was in the store, was the first time it was like, oh, wow, like you can do this, So it's, basically support your local comic store. That's, I think, what it really comes down to, and find the ones that offer the best kind of community experience and feel. And I think that's, I don't know. I think that's ultimately the name of the game here.
Well, I appreciate that you came on to talk about Radiant Black, but instead we're talking about comic stores. So I think we're out of time again. That's real good. You know what? we were gonna do a section on when you got into the business, when you worked for Marvel, and then all your work at DC. But I think we're just going to jump right into the Massive Verse.
Sure. And
because it does encompass a lot of different things. I do have a question I'm going to ask you at the end of the episode, which I'll tell you now so you can think about it. And how does deep cuts fit into the Massive Verse? But we'll get back to that. So, Andrew, I'm going to see, can you, and I'm putting him on the spot right now, how would you pitch Radiant Black to somebody? And I know you know how to do this because you've done it a bunch. I've watched you do it a bunch in the store.
I would pitch Radiant Black, especially that first trade, as Spider-Man meets the Power Rangers, but with like a healthy dose of millennial burnout.
Love that.
And I think that's what really makes it stand out to a lot of people, is it really captures an everyman vibe that I think has been lost in a lot of superhero media, where Radiant Black feels like the modern superhero because he's dealing with so many of the same issues that I think really resonate with people when he's outside the suit. And then when he's inside the suit, you're getting all the cool sci-fi superhero fights, blacklight issues, stuff like that.
A+, I would give you there. That's
you want to buy it now, Kyle? Do you want to buy that book?
I want to. Do you guys have it in stock? I'm actually
always. It's on our front table. We've got I think we have like 8 of volume 1 on our. When you first walk in, there's the table of like our immediate recommendations, and Radiant Black is right there.
Oh, I love it. Well, and now as we jump into issue 31, Marshall is full-time living in Chicago. He's living in Lakeview. So they're assuming Challengers survived the robot Armageddon was the Catalyst War. Maybe Marshall needs to swing by. He definitely has some outside-the-box ideas for promotion and merchandising opportunities. So you never know. There might be this might make a lot of sense here.
I didn't know how much we could talk about who's in the suit now, and I didn't want to give anything away. But at the same time, since 31 is such a good jumping on point, and I read it, and it's a real fun book, and I absolutely love that they go to Halakahiki, and it's picture perfect. It's like you're there. It's so good.
That's a big shout out to Joe Clark, who writes the book with me now, and it's actually it's the perfect timing for us to be doing it together as well, because for those who don't know, Joe is one of my best friends and oldest collaborators. We grew up playing in jazz bands together in Chicago suburbs and both went to Lockport together. And Joe's the one, we bonded over comic books. He's the one that introduced me to Alan Moore's work and a whole swath of other creators that I wasn't aware of. And whereas I pursued the film path, Joe stayed with music to much kind of acclaim and success here, especially in Chicago. And when I made The League, which was my college film about the superhero labor union in 1960 Chicago, which then became
KYLE.
It became KYLE. Joe scored the film. Then we did an original jazz album together for KYLE 10 years ago. And the film was 20 years ago. And now, we did deep cuts together and Ordinary Gods together. And he came to help me on a few issues of Radiant Black, because it turned out Joe, in addition to being this incredible musician and composer and arranger, he's worked with everyone from Yo-Yo Ma to, I think he did some Kanye West stuff back in the day, actually, too. Joe writes for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. He runs his own, big bands, teaches at DePaul and Northwestern, and then gigs as well as a trumpet player. He's also a fucking killer comic book writer. It's incredibly frustrating at how
pick a lane, Joe. Joe, pick a lane. Yeah.
But Joe is a lifelong, Chicagoan here. And as we're moving the book into Chicago full time with Marshall as Radiant Black, as he's kind of looking to level up here while also keeping the bottom from falling out in the aftermath of the Catalyst War. And it just makes it's really great. I never lived in the city proper. And so a lot of the touch points for me, it's I just love, Joe's the perfect resource to pull from and to come up with some of the stuff location wise, especially that we're doing. And so
there've been a lot of books over the years that have been set in Chicago. I remember reading Mighty Thor when he was set in Chicago. Yeah. Radiant Black 31 feels like my Chicago.
Yeah.
From the lakeshore, from the landmarks, from being in Lakeview, jumping around. It really I felt like I was reading a book about my city, which I was. But I do want to say, as far as Joe goes, you've listed a lot of accolades for him. You missed his most important one, that in 2024, he got on Challenger's wall.
He did text me that photo. That is of the accolades. I don't know how I didn't cite that first. You are right, my friend. That is, yes.
Well, I mean, he tried to get close enough to you that you could be in the same frame when he sent it. So I figured it was just your jealousy. You didn't want to, overshadow the fact that you were there 13 years before him.
You know what? I think he was at that signing though, when I did that.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Pretty sure he was there. If not that one, he was definitely at the next one I did at Challengers.
One of my favorite signing memories of anybody was your signing, and an entire class came in, and then you just went into teacher mode. You took them all into sidekicks and you taught them all about the art form and the medium of comics and how to do comics. And it stopped being a signing and it became a lesson. And it was 25 kids, 25, 30 kids. And they're all high school age too, when they're the most distracted and hard to contain. And you just captivated them all. I have a picture of it somewhere. I have to dig that out.
Remember that? Yeah, I would love to see that photo. I vaguely remember that. I don't. Yeah, I don't know. There's been a lot in the last couple of years that I don't know if you're aware with this whole pandemic thing we went through. Like, things are a little fuzzy for me.
I don't think I was. I think I wasn't. I was out of school that day.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yes, love Joe. Love that the book, especially that issue, felt that way to you. Like, that's always my goal, is to capture kind of like the essence and the real feel of being in a place, and especially a place like Chicago that I love so much. It's like, yeah, that's what we always set out to do here. So,
to one of Andrew's points from just before, not only does it feel like Marshall's a real person, but technologically the book is very modern with all of the apps that he's on and all of the different sites that he's following and the scanner he uses, and the different, from the dating app, but more to really digging into what people are saying about the Catalyst War and the Radiance and everything that's still going on. It's really, I always thought the trope of, and mainly in movies, of people being in a bar when the news is on and like they're getting their information that way is outdated, and no one does that anymore. Or, walking by an appliance store where the TVs are in the window and the news is on, like that doesn't happen. But literally, like, just the way he's using the internet to be a superhero is very current.
Totally. It's so funny, that trope in particular. I'm sure I've done it in other books, and I was just, as you were saying that, I was trying to figure out in my head, like, why we still do that. And I think it's weird. Like, I feel like for whatever reason, especially on like big two books, you do tend to feel like where you try to write things that feel a little bit more timeless in some ways.
Yeah.
And it's probably just like a product of, like, if you're not careful, you're always just kind of chasing the stuff that influenced you and that you loved as a kid, or however old you were when you were coming of age. But it is funny that you don't see more like social media stuff in books, considering how much it has, degraded our day-to-day lives. I remember when I was reading James Tynion's Batman run, and he was doing things with like the billionaire, the 20 somethings who are also billionaires, I assume probably out of like crypto.
Yeah, for sure.
Having to reinvest in the city and things like that. Like, I felt like James was starting to touch things before he left. He was starting to touch things that were making Gotham feel really contemporary, which I loved. And like, I've told this a little bit publicly before, but like one of the little bits that is kind of like the genesis of Radiant Black is a pitch that I was working on that I never even submitted at DC. Alex Antone had asked me to come up with something that would kind of be, it was going to end up being like the story of like, kind of like the, like, it was going to be like a backdoor, like, creation of a villain story, but you didn't know it up top. And I ultimately didn't want to do it because I was just like, just where my head was at. And this would have been 2019, 2020, early 2020, somewhere in there. No, I guess it would have been, no, it would have been 2019. Anyway, just where my head was at, I was like, I just don't think I want to write that. But the setup that I had was like, I loved the idea of like opening with this kid who's like late 20s getting laid off from Wayne Enterprises and having to move back in with his parents in like the Gotham suburbs.
Nice.
And just feeling like I haven't seen that, but it also feels, it's specific to Gotham, but it feels also like something very relatable. And, I know plenty of friends who've had to do that. And so that ended up becoming when I did build out what Radiant Black was going to become, like that little bit I really, really liked. And it was
the unemployed moving back home, be with your parents. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. I feel like as somebody who talks to creators all the time, I have a hard time maintaining a cohesive narrative thread. So we're bouncing all over the place. let us go back and give an overview of what, because we've said the massive verse a few times, but we keep focusing on Radiant Black. The massive verse is your corner of the Image universe where, the Radiant Black is your linchpin book, is your flagship, but there's a whole universe connected to it as well, not only with all the different Radiants. By the way, I want to just point out that for 2023, Radiant Red was Andrew's pick of the year.
Inferno Girl Red.
Oh, I'm sorry. But anyway,
Wow.
Yeah. See, that's why you're here, Andrew. That's why you're here.
No, honestly, Inferno Girl is I love that book so much. And book 2 is actually coming out this summer. We're done with it. We're like getting it printed right now for the hardcover edition for our Kickstarter backers, but then it'll be out probably in serialized form first in the direct market, and then in the collected edition, the trade paperback edition. But yeah, that was actually Inferno Girl Red in a lot of ways is actually where this all started. We were
the first spinoff.
Well, no, not even that. So the cool thing about this and how we've set this up is also a product of how it all came to be, which is that everything is its own thing. So we are really, really big on accessibility as far as each title is concerned. And so like a reader doesn't have to read any book in the line that they're not interested in. So everyone owns their own title, like the core creative team owns their own book. Each book is set in a different city by design. And then in the case of Inferno Girl Red, it's actually like, in a different universe, but that she's the only one that's outside of our main universe. And then once a year, we do a 50-page one-shot special called Supermassive.
Supermassive.
The characters cross over. It's a done-in-one story. If you've read the books up to that year, Supermassive, everyone in the book is reflecting where that characters, is at in their own kind of story arcs. It ends up being additive to those characters' story arcs. But if you haven't read the books or even some of the books, it's okay. Like you'll learn everything you need to know in that issue, in that Supermassive, so that it's, again, one cohesive, full narrative that you're getting there. So it's additive, but not necessary is how we like to kind of describe it. But ultimately, it's also something that like is designed. The Supermassives are designed to be really fun as well. And so it's something that like we tried to make especially for retailers. It's like, it's just a great done in one. It's perfect bound. So like I said, it's a 50-page story. So there's like some good heft to it, but it's also like something that you could slot on your shelf because it's got a spine on it as well. And so that approach really was born out of the fact that when Eric Stevenson brought up to me the prospects of building an original creator-owned superhero, he said it's something he wanted to do more of for some time. And, some creators hadn't really kind of bit on it. He said, feel free to tell anyone that you think would be a good fit or want to do something like this. And so my first call was to Ryan Parrott, and he pitched me what became Rogue Sun, like fully baked, like 3 days later.
Oh, wow.
And my second call, which I guess technically would have kind of been my first call, was to Matt Groom, because we were actually already working on Inferno Girl Red before I started Radiant Black.
Oh,
interesting.
Yeah. So the idea for Inferno Girl Red was something that Matt came up with some years ago when we were wrapping up Self-Made, which was his first Image series with Eduardo Ferragato and Marcelo Costa, who both of them are the core artists on Radiant Black, and Marcelo's the co-creator with me. And Matt had this idea about doing something that skewed more YA, about a young female superhero, Cassia Costa. The powers come from self-belief and hope. And she's a very pragmatic girl who's not filled with a lot of that right now. And so
in today's world, come on.
Yes. And so she enrolls she gets into this very prestigious science, boarding school called the Apex Academy. It's in this fictional place called Apex City. And her mother is a journalist who has had her reputation kind of ruined because over the years, her mother actually covered this essentially superhero that no one believed existed, named Inferno Girl Red. And it ended up like really kind of wrecking her mom's reputation professionally in the years since. And Inferno Girl Red hasn't been around in some time. And so just as Cassia gets into the school and is starting to like find her footing there, essentially these dark warlords end up ripping the city out of the earth in order to hand it over to their kind of like dark god to consume it. And this big force field goes up around it to protect it. And just before that happens, this dragon bracelet rockets into the city, and it ends up finding Cassia and transforms her into Inferno Girl Red. This bracelet is like a multiversal device, and it comes to places where it's needed in times of great need. And so now Cassia has to become the new Inferno Girl. You learn at some point that maybe that bracelet wasn't intended for her. And anyway, so the book is written by Matt, and it's drawn by Erica D'Urso and colored by Igor Monti. And it is just, I mean, Alex, you can, I'd love to hear what you think. Or sorry, Alex, Andrew, I'd love to hear what you think.
Oh, good.
I think it's visually stunning. Like it's very anime influenced. It's very like if Studio Trigger was doing a comic is how I kind of like to describe it. And that book was in the works. And then Radiant Black, I started up, and Rogue Sun started up. And so we had this call one night where I rallied everyone around or rounded everybody up, and we got on a Zoom, and I was like so excited. I was like, why don't we do this? Like, why don't we actually build a little line? And that's really how we kicked off what became.
Wow. So Inferno Girl Red is the linchpin. She's the link.
Yeah, she is. And then obviously Radiant Black came out first, and we published for a year. And then we did a supermassive that introduced Rogue Sun and Inferno Girl Red. And then their books came out after that supermassive.
What I think is annoying is that you go through such lengths to make every single book tie in together, but also maintaining the sense of you don't have to read them all. And normally that's a relief for me as a reader, but with the Massiverse, I do want to read them all. And
that's like, a real champagne problem right there. I love it.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of your efforts being wasted there, because like that seems like everybody is reading it all too. I mean, just anecdotally from what I've seen at Challengers, like I don't think we have that many customers who sort of pick and choose. I think a lot of people are just all in.
Yeah, everybody gets Supermassive. Everybody gets the Radiance. I think Rogue Sun is the one where you have a few non-Radiant readers who get that one, and then some of the Radiant people don't go that way. But
and that's the thing, is
it has its own core.
I love
each
that.
of these books is like so easy to pitch without even mentioning that there's a larger universe that you can dive into. You know, Rogue Sun is just like, oh, you like Batman Beyond? Here, check out this trade.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, yeah, that's the thing. Like we see, like I'll see sometimes people will comment. We're starting to do more and more on like Instagram with Reels and YouTube and even some TikTok stuff. And it's been a lot of fun to see people comment. Like there'll be people that jump in and they're like, you know, I hate Radiant Black. Rogue Sun is so much better. That we love that, because it's like every book is for someone different. Like it's not supposed to feel, each book is not supposed to feel like the other books. You know, they should feel like they can be in the same kind of line and you know, air quotes universe, but every title should have its own, you know, identity and tone. And we're all different creators. You know, Ryan and I have a lot of overlap. I mean, we all have overlap, I think, but we all worked on Power Rangers books too. But Ryan and I are while being very similar in many ways, we're very different in others. And so, you know, I love that. And that's, you know, of course I would love if you can convert a few to the other titles. Like I wouldn't say no to that either. But especially now as we come back, because with Radiant Black 31, we're following that up with then 2 weeks later with Rogue Sun 25, which is a big new jumping on point for Rogue Sun as well. And so, yeah, we're doing like, I'm sure did you guys get copies of the story so far?
Yes. And the story so far is excellent. I was going to mention it before we got too far away. Radiant Black, the story so far is literally a free giveaway comic book, all new art and story, technically, condensing down everything that's happened in the first 30 plus issues, getting you to the point where you can seamlessly jump into number 31.
Yeah, and it's like a 16-page free comic that we sent to stores in like bundles of 10. We also put it up online for free, so you can read it on the Image site for free. But also we actually set up a unique URL through our Massiverse and our Radiant Black site. If you just go to radiant.black/ketchup, not the condiment, the word ketchup.
Ketchup, yeah, okay.
Radiant.black/ketchup. You can read the story so far there for free. And then we also have we're actually selling the trades ourselves as well through our own Shopify, on a big sale right now, directly from the creators, purely just to make it as accessible as possible.
I have no problem with that. I appreciate that you added that little caveat to be we're not trying to take away from retailers is the underlying message I heard.
Yes.
But I'm all for, you getting the book out however you can. I'm for creators literally signing at every store that they can do is in the same city. If you want to sign at Dark Tower and Challengers and Alley Cat or Goblin, do it all. Do them all. The more books you sell, the better for everybody. But, mentioning things like the story so far and the website, and I'm pretty sure I heard in the background, Andrew was just claiming the domain Radiant Black/mustard. It's weird. I thought I heard him typing away in the background.
It's going to blow up.
Yeah. Also, I've told Andrew he's not allowed to pitch you his Radiant Lawyer comic idea on this call. But so
that's for an in-person. When we grab
for C2E2.
Yeah, we'll
at the Tiki Bar, then we can go through that. Yeah.
But I wanted to point out how great everything that is in this world, how you're so good at using just modern technology, again, harping on that a little bit, not just in the confines of the story, but, you just mentioned all the platform you use, how you have this separate website, you have this free comic you put out. Your book, No One, which was a really great murder mystery in the superhero world, but also had its own real world podcast with Patton Oswalt and she's all that Rachel Lee Cook. Mm. Yeah, there's so many extra things that you're doing on all these other platforms. And as you pointed out, you don't have to listen to the No One podcast to follow the book, or you could just listen to the podcast if you want. But together, they're this giant puzzle. You get so much more when you do. And it's so, as far as most comics go, it's so far outside the box as far as, you're still trying to direct everyone to the comic book itself, but you're doing such a good job of being a creator of today. And I don't even know how to be a retailer of today. You do so many different things that I'm like, man, yeah, sure. We have a podcast. Yeah, I guess you could say that. But yeah, the lengths that you're going to are things that I've never seen anybody else do. And I think it's amazing.
Well, I really appreciate that. It is something that, we're really, really passionate about that stuff. And really, I describe it as us trying to push the boundaries on what comics can be, especially what modern contemporary superhero books can be. And a big reason for that, we lean on the idea of immersion quite a bit. And I think really it's just because in this day and age, it's so hard to feel like there's any magic left in the world, at least for me. And so anytime I can make something that is in the spirit of, what made me such a fan of not only this incredible medium, but this incredible genre of superheroes, and for medium, I mean comic books. Like that's what I want to do for other people. And so trying to do it with the tools and the platforms that exist today feels like the best way to do it. And, I also come from this, as I said, this writing and directing background, but I was a sound editor for like 10 years. And there are a lot of other things I do and love. And so it ends up being an opportunity for me to get really excited about things. And I feel like that kind of excitement and that passion comes across, in the work. And in the case of No One, like that's a really good example of this, where it actually originally started as a Batman project Tim Sale and I were doing.
Oh.
Yeah, very, very different, but it was originally this project he and I were doing was called Gordon and Son, and it was Commissioner Gordon and his serial killer son James Jr. solving cold case murders together that Gordon actually thought James might have committed, and this was his kind of way of getting him to like confess. It was like Hannibal in Gotham City, and it was also going to be kind of like a spiritual sequel to like Long Halloween and Dark Victory, and for different reasons, it ended up not happening. I assume it's just because DC doesn't like printing money. But
yeah.
I'm kidding. But Tim was
great.
Tim was really excited, and Tim was sketching, and this was back in like 2017. And anyway, so there was something, No One is very, very different from that, but the core kind of, there are little bits of it that certainly inspired what No One became. And so we actually dedicated the first issue of No One to Tim, and the whole book is done in the New Frontier grid, the 3 panels per page grid that can then be subdivided. And that was Tim's favorite way to do comics.
Oh.
He felt like that was like the purest way of telling stories in comics, and that Darwin had like really cracked it. And so if you look at Tim's work over the last, 10 years of his life and career, like you'll notice like that's how he did most of his stories. But the kind of central conceit of No One is that, as you said, it's this like superhero murder mystery, and there's this like digital hacktivist named No One who doxes these 4 like super corrupt people, and then nothing happens, and so someone else in the city starts killing them, and that ends up sparking this like ideological, killing movement built around the idea of accountability. And so the hacktivist No One ends up becoming like a physical presence, and he's kind of our Batman type, and you don't know who he is. His identity is one of the central mysteries of the book. And so 2 of the characters in the book are reporters who are talked into starting a podcast by their newspaper, chronicling their investigation, not only into this killing movement, but also into No One's identity. So we did that podcast for every issue as a scripted audio series with, as you said, Rachel Lee Cook and Patton Oswalt. And then we also had like Todd Stashwick and Yuri Lowenthal and Tara Platt and Walter Jones from Power Rangers and Adam MacArthur from Jujutsu Kaisen and Lauren Lester, who's the voice of Dick Grayson, Robin and Nightwing, Batman the Animated Series. He's the voice of No One for us. And then
it seems to me like doing that seems harder than writing the book itself.
It was a lot. Like a lot. And we were doing that at the same time we were doing the Catalyst War last year, and like a few other big things. And it was a really tough year. And I also then had like another huge surgery, and so I wasn't walking for months, and there was a lot going on. So, but the other components of No One then were that we didn't just do the audio series, we also did all of the in-universe websites. So like you can actually go to the site where No One doxes the people. It's 00110000.info, which is binary for 0. And if you know the right code to access it, which you learn from the podcast and the book, you can view all the doxing files, as well as we did like Unreal Engine videos.
Man,
and then
so much.
There's also like all the newspaper articles. Here's a fun Chicago connection. So all the newspaper articles that exist in the book and in the world, we made those as well. And I hired I hired Peter Nikias, he's a crime reporter, formerly of the Chicago Tribune and CNN. Peter covered overnights and all the gun violence in Chicago for like 10 years. I've read him for forever. And so he joined us as a consultant and wrote all of these articles with us. And then at the end of it all, we put out, Brian Buccellato and I wrote all of this, and then Geraldo Borges drew the book. At the end of it all, there's like, I don't want to spoil things, but for reasons, there's some footage that shows up in the world from the No One operation. And so at San Diego Comic-Con, we dropped a live action trailer that we shot where no one in a suit and everything. And that's where we announced the story's actually continuing, and we're making a found footage superhero documentary where all of the intention is that all the actors who voice the characters on the podcast, they're going to play them in front of camera as well. And so the movie both adapts the events of the comic and the audio series and the websites and all that stuff. And it also continues the story. And so like, it's all one big multi-narrative.
This is insane. The amount of work behind this, like you sent me No One #1 and I loved it. And I was talking to you about it before it came out. And I remember, you didn't just send it to me, you sent it to retailers as well. And I remember talking to Mitchell Davies from All Star in Melbourne and just raving about it. And he's like, I'm not really sure. He's like, it's good, but I don't know how to sell it. And I remember just pitching it to him. And he's like, my God, that made so much more sense. And there was just the comic. Like, how did this not get so much acclaim from everything you did? And I'm guilty of not being aware of so many of these extra things that you had done. And I'll confess, I didn't listen to every episode of the podcast. My podcast listening has fallen off as the comic industry changed, and I'm not driving out to pick up comics from Elk Grove Village warehouses anymore. That's not a thing I do anymore. And that was, several hours in a car a week, and that was all podcast time. And then sorting all of those books was my podcast listening time. It's in Sidekicks, the other half of our store, doing that. But now, books come any day of the week, and it's much smaller amounts because it's from different distributors. So there's no like, oh, you're not going to be in this room for 4 hours. You're not going to be in the car for 3 hours, then in the room for 4 hours, sorting all this. And the Tuesdays was my podcast day. Anyway, that's just a long way to say that I fell off it by the end.
I will say.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say, for No One, the first time through, I didn't bother with any extra stuff. I just read the comic itself.
You're a comic purist.
Well, I stopped before the final issue, and then I went back and I reread it with all the extra stuff before finishing the series. So I thought it did a great job of like walking that tightrope of like, it's there, it's rewarding, but you don't need it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think of all of the extra material we did, the audio series is the stuff that is the most additive, and I would argue the most necessary of the additional material, because the story does end up going back and forth between the two mediums. At the end of each issue, there's like an ad for the episode with a QR code taking you to that episode. And, I think it's in issue 5. They start naming, or is it 5 or is it 4? It's 4. No, it is 5. In episode 5, they start naming suspects on the podcast, and then those suspects start getting killed in issue 6 because they were named on the podcast. And so there's things like that. And I think to your point, Patrick, like honestly, like the answer to like I don't know however you framed it, why didn't more people talk about this? I think actually your answer is like the exact reason. I think the industry has changed so much. And again, I think retailers are stretched so razor thin to trying to keep track of so many things on a day-to-day basis, much less all the new books that are constantly coming out. And there's so many books, so many great books. I think it's really hard to A, keep up with everything, and B, I think like I've talked about this actually quite a bit recently with some of the different podcasts. I think I did talk about this with David on off panel. It's one thing to do something really outside the box and to even do it, I think we did it really well. But it's another thing to teach your audience how to engage with it. And I don't know how many people ultimately were really aware of all of the extra and additional material we were doing. For the last year or so, I would say every time I do a signing and people bring up copies of No One for me to sign, I would say that about half the people don't know that there's an audio series. And the other half that does know there's an audio series, I'd say half of them
have actually listened to it.
Have never listened to it. Yeah. So what we did, and the other thing was like last year, we had a bunch of delays last year, and like for all the reasons I was just talking about a few minutes ago. And so that doesn't help, but people weren't really talking about the book from the jump. I'll say that. Like I went to Comics Pro in Pittsburgh, actually, where the book is set. And it was a few days after FOC on issue 1, and the numbers weren't what we were hoping they were going to be. And I did a little presentation at Comics Pro where I was talking about Radiant Black, and we debuted this trailer for the Catalyst, announcing the Catalyst War and everything. But I also took a few minutes to like actually talk about No One and what it is. And I walked through this thing, what I just told you guys, and we've done this, and we did the podcast for real with Rachel Lee Cook and Patton Oswalt and everything. And I swear to you, basically every head in the room, retailer wise, turned to look to the person next to them and
to be like, did you know?
Yeah. And it's like, oh man, that's a bummer, because we messaged it a lot, but clearly not well enough. And so what Brian and I and the whole team kind of took solace in was that we knew, like, the plan for this project to culminate with the film was the plan from day one. So we knew we were going to get to this point where we're ultimately going to put out all 10 issues, all 10 episodes, all the extra material, but then we're going to put out a trade paperback, and we're announcing the movie. And so we knew that the trade paperback was going to be the time for us to like really try to push this in after, you know what I mean? Like we're going to do it right. So the trade paperback for No One actually collects all 10 issues, and it also incorporates all of the ancillary material by way of, like actually designing pages for the articles that are really important, but then also incorporating something like 34, 35 QR codes into the book itself. Wow. And each piece of ancillary material is laid out in proper order with date stamps that are specific to the story. So everything lines up properly. And page 1 of the book literally tells readers, this is an interactive story. Like scan the QR codes, listen to the episodes, read the websites. And we also did something like 145 pages of art revisions.
Oh my gosh.
We hired the costume designer for the film, and a wonderful designer named Kate Adams. And so Kate came on and helped us figure out like wardrobe and looks that we're going to basically lean on for live action. So Geraldo went back and adjusted a lot of the wardrobe and the characters, and as well as like fleshing out some things we weren't, none of us, quite loved when we first did it, so that the trade would be kind of like the ultimate way to experience this. So that's out now. So
it's fairly new too. It just came out at the end of November. So it's like still a brand new trade. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's also like, that's the whole story right there. And so it is something that I feel like as retailers become more aware of it, I feel like it is kind of like an easy thing to hand sell, because it's like, what is it? It's like $24.99. It's something like that.
Yeah. But it's right there, $24.99 for 10 issues is already a deal based off of other publishers' price points.
Plus, all of the audio episodes are in there, included for free as well, and all the extra material. So it ends up being like a 365-page book, I want to say, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I mean, off the top of my head, I'd guess 320. That's not because I'm looking at the listing right now. That's just that's my guess.
That's just that's that.
It's an educated guess based off of a lifetime of comic retelling experience. I think the message that people should get from this is the amount of detail and care that you put into this book is translated into what you put into every book that you do. And, we didn't even mention your huge run on Nightwing, the series in which you did in fact blow challengers up. You had the distinction of having the red symboled Nightwing as your Nightwing.
Yeah.
Everyone's favorite.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, we skipped most of your DC work, but and we barely mentioned Power Rangers, which, that's I think an important book in your career, and the number of Power Rangers creators who have gone on to do so many other things in today's marketplace is kind of amazing.
Yeah,
so
there's a lot of us. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I want to say, Andrews, Dan Mora, your favorite artist?
He's up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's mine as well. Dan and I have never actually done a book together over all these years, like not only from the DC front, but from the Power Ranger front.
Yeah, Ryan got him for Power Rangers.
I know. I was definitely jealous when Go-Go launched, because with no disrespect to Hendry Preseccia, who was drawing the main Power Ranger book, when Go-Go launched with Dan, I said to Daphne, I don't know how many issues in, I was like, why can I not, just for a little while, can we get Dan? Like, oh, you're killing me here. So 1 second here. 1 sec, guys. Sorry.
I'm surprised he couldn't, because Dan Mora clearly able to do multiple books a month. I just read Superman this morning. Yeah. Oh, no, that was just for Andrew while you were doing what you had to do. Don't worry. We were just filling.
Yeah, Dan was busy doing Santa Claus stuff too at the time.
Yeah.
You know what, though? I did get to work with Dan on one really cool thing, which actually you guys, I don't know if you have a copy yet, but it just came out. So we did a card fighting game for the Massiverse. And that game, we did it in partnership with Solus Games, or Solus Game Studio. And it's a 1v1 card fighting game. All the moves and the character and the art are specific to all the characters in the Massiverse, and all the art comes from the books themselves. But the character art cards and the box art is all done by Dan Mora.
Ah, there you go. So that counts.
Exactly.
That counts on your Dan Mora checklist. That's perfect.
Yeah, so it's that scratched the itch a little bit for me, but one day, Dan and I will do we'll do something bigger.
Andrew, do you have any questions for Kyle before we let him go?
Yeah, I did get the chance to read Radiant 31, and
I hope you don't mind I shared it with him for this.
No, please.
First of all, I thought it's going to work incredibly as a jumping on point, but I am curious how much of this new direction was determined before the fan vote, and how much of it was like, oh, okay, the results are in, I got to get going.
That's a great question.
Andrew, do you want to explain the fan vote just for listeners that may not be aware?
Right. So if you're not aware, the identity of the current Radiant Black was determined by a fan vote.
And a very narrow fan vote, no less.
It was
one of two options.
Should I give the super quick context on?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So the book for 2 years was like and
this is going to be another illustration of you going outside of the box and doing things that are not usually done in comics with the 0.5 issues. Yeah.
Well, and yes, we can talk all about that. Basically for 2 years, the book was actually, it was a two-hander. Like the way Andrew pitched the book, I love. The way that I pitched the book is very similar, where I describe it as being this very contemporary superhero series about two disillusioned millennials navigating failed dreams and credit card debt with the help of existential black holes and giant robots, or with the help of miniature black holes and existential giant robots. It's really your dealer's choice.
It's adaptable. Yeah, exactly.
And then if people like Power Rangers, I like to joke that it's like Power Rangers with adult problems. And so
that's a good line as well. Yeah.
For 2 years, these two best friends have navigated their, changing relationship and, the feelings of expectations and not living up to them, and just the state of the world and all these things, and also like the big superhero kind of component of it all. And by issue 24, we were on the verge of a big machine empire called Catalyst, where this is where the powers, the miniature black holes, actually come from. And they're coming to Earth basically to take back what is theirs and challenge Radiant Black for kind of like the fate of the new way versus the old way, which is essentially like a, free will versus fate kind of argument. And that Radiant Black is going to be put through a series of trials for the fate of all of that, but also honestly for Earth, because most planets that don't pass the trials of Catalyst are then subjugated by the Machine Empire, because Catalyst is the challenge that you must overcome in order to kind of be worthy to keep going. And the powers aren't working anymore. The two characters have been sharing the Radiant, and then they discover that the reason they're not working is because they're not designed to be shared, and only one of them can be Radiant Black going forward permanently, like for the rest of their lives. And they have to decide. And the last page of issue 24 is the big giant existential robot speaking directly to readers saying, you must decide. And there's a big QR code there. And when you scan that QR code, we did a vote to determine who would win, who would be Radiant Black. And we ran that vote for about, I think it was a month or month and a half. And we said we were going to give the answer in issue 25, which also kicked off the 6-part Catalyst War event. And so we did give that answer in 25, but we actually gave 2 answers. So
the answer was both.
We made both endings. We made the ending where the characters choose Nathan, and we made the ending where the characters choose Marshall. And we put those 2 endings out under the variant, under the A cover and the B cover, and we didn't tell readers that there was more than one ending. We did reach out to retailers. I reached out to about 75 stores personally to let them know like this was going on, because then what we announced, and I said in the email, this is actually what the secret of the Catalyst War is, that for reasons that are integral to the story, for the next, what would be 5 releases, we actually made 2 comics for every release, and with 2 different art teams following the 2 diverging timelines. So it ended up being, the original plan was to put out the other timeline like under the B cover each month.
Yeah.
And then we got our order numbers, and it was very clear that we had confused retailers far too much.
From the retailer standpoint, I do want to point out that whether this was your decision or Image's decision, you overshipped that first issue.
Yes.
To match. So
yes.
Whatever you ordered for, the A cover, the A storyline, you got the same for the B cover, the B storyline, yes. the eventual 0.5 storyline. And immediately retailers started to freak out about like, well, I didn't know this and I didn't order right and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you don't have to, they covered your back.
Yes.
You're gonna get it. So,
yeah. And I heard some different opinions on that. And, some stores were really
from retailers. I can't believe that.
And some stores were not. Some stores who had ordered right were unhappy about that. And I mean, look, you're never going to please everyone. Ultimately, what I'll say is like, so we then decided, we pivoted into, rather than just doing 26A and 26B, we changed it to 26 and 26.5, 27, 27.5, etc. And I know it was challenging, probably with everything going on, to keep track of. What I'll say though is like, this was a story that was so important to me, and this was the way that I had dreamed of telling it. And the idea of using the variant cover as a storytelling mechanism to explore multiple timelines like this, no one's ever done it in comics before. Now, it's turned out that no one's ever done it in comics before for a reason. But we take big swings, and I'm so immensely proud of it and so immensely proud of the story. And it almost killed us last year, and we did have delays on it, but it's all out now, and it's in volumes 5 and volume 6. And again, the whole creative team and myself both, like, this was the intention from day one, and it's the way we wanted to tell it. I stand by it narratively. I'm so immensely proud of it. And now as we enter into the new era with issue 31, here's the really good news. We're down to just one book. It's super clean. Doing that again. That was a product of that event. And it was, again, for reasons integral to the narrative. But we're going forward now with 31, 32, 33 monthly. And anyone who wants to catch up, like there's the story so far that I think walks through the main beats of it, but then also the trade paperbacks as well.
And a beautiful new hardcover as well.
For the first 12 issues, yeah, for year one. Yeah. But
well, I just want to say, as far as the whole Catalyst War storyline goes, it made perfect sense the way you did it. It made sense as to why the stories were structured the way they were. I think it would have been much funnier if it was collected in volumes 5 and volume 5.5.
Okay, so you say that. So so Michael, our editor and designer, he names our trades, and volume 5 is called Crisis and volume 6 is called Infinite Earths. And every trade name is kind of riffing on a comic book staple.
Yeah.
And for volume 7, which is kicking off our new jumping on point, our rebirth era, right? Michael wanted to call it volume 2. So it would be volume 7, which
volume
is
2.
Volume 2. And we all vetoed that.
Yeah.
And
fair.
to this day, he says that we just don't like fun. And I said, I am not going to get yelled at over that.
You definitely would have.
Yes, I know.
My only criticism, and this is not anything to do with anything you guys did, it's from the data standpoint. The 0.5 issues in all the metadata was considered a whole different book. Yeah. So it didn't automatically pull for subscribers for our system, which is Managed Comics. And they're just using the data that they got from Image directly. So for every single issue, every single 0.5 issue, we had to manually add every copy to every subscriber who ordered it for the run of it. But again, that is not your fault at all. That is a data point, and it's like when annuals don't have the same data point. So it's like you can't just you don't automatically get the annual. We have to sign people up for it directly.
No, and
that's all. It's a little thing.
No, I feel bad about it. I really do. I mean, it was never my intention to. We were trying to do something different and something cool and unconventional. It was never my intention to create frustration or more work for anyone. We were at New York Comic-Con, I think last year, or maybe it was not the one a few months ago, but the one the year before that. And we were at like one of the little summits, and there were retailers giving, some speeches, and basically one of the retailers went up and was talking about like, we have all of these things to do and to manage every single day, every single week, and it's so stressful. And she basically said, so please, creators, when you're thinking about doing your fun gimmick or whatever, like, please keep us in mind because we're dying here, And I felt awful. Like, that's not how.
Was he staring at you the entire time?
No. But it is something that, like, look, there had been, someone had suggested at one point, like, you should do as a flip book instead. And it's like, I understand.
I love flip books.
I do too, but that's different. And it's not.
And then it's got to be double the price. And then, I mean, I guess.
Yeah. And it's just like,
but it doesn't feel the same.
Yeah. And we could have, in hindsight, if I could do it all over, the way that I probably would do it is I would probably just do it as sequential numbering, and you put 2 out a month at the same time. But it's like, it's issue 26 and 27 out as one, 28 and 29 out as one, 30 and 31 out as one at the same time, rather than doing like, oh, they're half of the same number because you're playing with, you don't have to commit to the bit that hard, probably.
Yeah. I don't know. I think the first thing I thought of in that regard is that if people see them on the shelf, they would just think that it's a variant cover, not a whole different issue.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. The thing is, though, like, the covers are connecting covers for the two, so they all create a connecting image. And that was what I was hoping, visually was gonna. but it, I understand. So look, we've learned from it, and we're just not going to do fun things anymore. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
We're still going to do, we're still going to do a lot of fun things. We're just going to be, we're going to communicate much better with everyone. And, I'm literally sitting here in my apartment today, packing up boxes that I'm sending to a bunch of retailers with like signed copies of our trades and a little letter from me saying like, this is what we're doing. Like, this is what, here's everything. If you want to get caught up on stuff, like, we're committed to the direct market. Like, as I said before, like, there aren't a lot of books at issue number 30 and Rogue Sun at issue 25. And like, we're not going to go anywhere here. Like, we want to keep doing this, and we want to be, stay accessible and exciting and consistent. And so we want to be something that stores can count on and direct people towards, because I know that, Andrew, to your point, I think there's always frustration about feeling like everything's rebooting and just starting over with a new number one. But I definitely feel it now in the last couple of years, especially to a degree that I really hadn't in the past. And so if we can be kind of a mainstay that is going to be just, you can rely on to continue to push not only narrative in new directions, but like the way we tell narrative in new directions. Like, I think ultimately, like, I think that's a cool thing to do. And hopefully more and more readers and retailers will agree and get on board.
That sounds great. And just the sheer commitment you have to always promoting your work, with, as evidenced by you sending those trades out, that's an insane amount of extra work and time and money on your part. Totally. Also, you do not have to send them to us, because we're on your side and have all of this stuff available already. And I will
cross you off the list.
Take it. You send it to somebody who needs it. We're already on board, Kyle. Radiant Black number 31, the brand new jumping on point, perfect for new readers, is available February 26th, but it's also still available for ordering right now. The FOCs aren't until the weekend of February 2nd, February 3rd. So people have until then to add it to their polls lists. We are fortunate that we have customers and retailers that listen to this. So hopefully retailers have learned and are jumping on the bandwagon if they haven't already, or at least giving it a look, and just read it for yourself. Like, ultimately, the books that we sell the most of are the books that we like. And it helps when, we can say that the book is good. And definitely both Andrew and I have read Radiant Black 31 and thoroughly enjoyed it. And it is, again, such a perfect jumping on point. Kyle, I don't feel like we've done you justice today as far as going over everything you've ever done in the industry, but
I've blocked a lot of it out. We don't need to.
That's fair. That's fair. But I think your dedication and passion for what you do is clearly evident over this entire recording. And, we've already been fans of yours for a while anyway, but then someone like Andrew, who I haven't known Andrew as long as I've known you, Kyle, but Andrew is a huge fan of yours as well. And it had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with you. So good work.
That's true.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I look forward to us grabbing those
tiki drinks
and hearing about the blind lawyer who's not green. Or, sorry, the visible lawyer, the visibility-driven lawyer. Just
there
the lawyer, the lawyer who's
we'll workshop it.
There, I love it.
Yeah, we're not good enough on our own to come up with these ideas. We need you to hammer it all together, Kyle. Kyle Higgins, you're writing everything from every publisher right now, I think. So people can just pick up a book off the shelf and your name is on it. Where are your main social media hangouts for people to follow?
So probably at this point, Instagram at Kyle D. Higgins. But honestly, the best spot is we have a newsletter. It's our Black Market Narrative newsletter. Black Market Narrative is my little creative collective studio that we do all the books through and all the cool, other stuff we do.
I love it because we're getting all these books off the black market.
Exactly. So if you go to blackmarket.la, you can sign up for the newsletter right there, just blackmarket.la/newsletter. And then we started a Massiverse Instagram and Massiveverse, YouTube, and actually and TikTok as well. And so we're putting out a lot of stuff on those platforms now. And a lot of it is also designed for like general awareness. And we're trying to drive people to comic stores, like to pick up these books monthly. So we're going to be doing a lot of different, some of it very dumb. Well, I say dumb.
Those are the best. Fun, but those are the best. Yeah,
we've got some really insane stuff we're doing right now that we'll be putting out on those accounts coming up. I've literally just recorded with Will Friedle and Ryder Strong like 2 days ago for something that you'll see this week, and then those guys are actually joining us. We're doing a Radiant Black audiobook with a full voice cast that we'll be putting out later this year, and we've got some really fun names on that one as well. It's Will and Ryder playing Marshall and Nathan, and then Ann Yatko from Jujutsu Kaisen playing Radiant Red, Melissa Navia from Star Trek Strange New Worlds playing Radiant Pink, Lauren Lester is playing Nathan's dad, Kim Rhodes from Sweet Life of Zack and Cody and Kim Possible, Supernatural, she's playing Nathan's mom, and then Todd Stashwick voicing 001. And this guy, I don't know, he seems promising. Might have a shot at doing some bigger stuff down the line. Troy Baker is voicing a Shift for us. So,
fantastic.
Yeah, we're very excited about it. We're going to start recording the next few weeks. There's a bunch of casts we haven't announced, so we'll be doing that like through the newsletter.
If you need the voices of random Chicagoers who are killed in any of the building collapses or anything, Andrew and I are available for scale.
Oh yeah, no. We've got a most favored nations right here. We can hook that up.
Fantastic.
I love it. But yeah, but
Andrew, quick, practice being crushed by a building.
We needed. Ooh, that's not bad. That's not bad. I felt the desperation. We do need a new Wilhelm scream, so we can.
Yeah, we do.
Sure, hook that up.
I literally just saw this thing on Instagram, an Instagram ad where it's called the Wilhelm scream prank, where it's a tiny little box that emits that scream like randomly over the course of 60 minutes, and you just hide it in somebody's house. That's the worst thing you could ever do to someone. I would tear the place apart looking for. That's worse than like when your smoke detector just is low on battery. The battery
for no reason, and you can't figure out which smoke detector it is. Like that would drive me more insane. I don't actually like the Wilhelm scream.
It takes me out of everything because of how noticeable it is.
Exactly. You guys are lame. I love it.
Yeah,
it's Andrew's ringtone.
Yeah, every time I get a text.
You know what? That's going to be Marshall's ringtone now. That's all I'm saying.
There you go.
All right, Kyle, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be on Contest of Challengers. We are very excited for the direction of Radiant Black, of Rogue Sun, and everything else in the Massiveverse. And we didn't even get a chance to mention Venomverse vs. Spider-Verse coming out later in the year.
Yeah, Well, we can talk about that next time. We can get we'll get Matt Groom to join us, and we can talk about. We can do a twofer. We can talk about Spider-Verse versus Venomverse, the new event that Matt and I are writing at Marvel. I think it launches in May, and then we've got Matt's Inferno Girl Red book 2 coming out very soon after that. So that might actually make perfect sense for us.
That's perfect.
Another little.
It's always Kyle Higgins synergy. I love it.
Trying something like that.
Andrew, thanks for being on this. Kyle, thank you so much. Everybody else, thanks for listening, and keep reading comics.
This has been Contest of Challengers. Thanks for listening. Keep reading comics. Challengers is located at 1845 Northwestern Avenue in the Bucktown neighborhood of Chicago. 773-278-0155. Keep up to date with new releases and events at challengerscomics.com. And help fund this podcast at patreon.com/challengers.